I remember the screech of tires more than the impact itself. A sound that cut through the rain and split my life into a before and after. When I came to, everything was white walls, white lights, the faint beep of machines dragging me back into consciousness. My body was still, unresponsive. Pain lived everywhere, yet it didn't scream. It whispered, insidious and constant. Then there was her. Amelia. I couldn't speak at first, couldn't move, but I felt her fingers wrap around mine. Warm. Grounding. Real. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, over and over like a prayer. Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before, like grief and guilt tangled together. In that moment, I believed her. I clung to those words like a man drowning. The doctor said it was a miracle I survived. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, a shattered femur. They had put me back together with pins and rods and hope. My recovery would be long, painful, uncertain. But Amelia was there. Every morning when I opened my eyes, she was by my bed. Her hand brushing hair from my forehead, feeding me bites of soup, reading aloud from whatever novel she had lying around. We laughed. We cried. She was my strength when I had none. I remembered our wedding vows through the morphine haze, in sickness and in health. This was the sickness. And she stayed. Or so I thought. The nurses adored her. "Your wife is such a gem," one would say as she adjusted my fore. Not everyone sticks around when things get hard. I was proud. Grateful. Humbled. But there were cracks I didn't see, not yet. Moments that slipped by like shadows on the wall. How she sometimes seemed distracted, her phone lighting up with messages she quickly dismissed. How she would suddenly have to leave, early, often, citing work, errands, family. I brushed it off. I had to. My world had narrowed to the 4 sterile walls of that hospital room. She was the only constant. The only comfort I had. Still, sometimes, late at night when the machines hissed and I was alone with my thoughts, something gnawed at me. A quiet discomfort. An echo of distance that hadn't always been there. But I silenced it. Told myself I was imagining things. That trauma warped perception. I had to believe that. Because the alternative, that the woman holding my hand had already let go in her heart, was a pain I wasn't strong enough to face. Not yet. The pain meds kept my body sedated, but my mind stayed sharp, too sharp. With nothing but time and walls around me, I started to notice things. Amelia's visits grew shorter. She still came most days, yes, but the hours she used to spend curled in the chair beside me were shrinking. She no longer brought books or stayed through dinner. She started arriving with her makeup already done, dressed in clothes I hadn't seen her wear in a long time, tight jeans, heels, perfume. I tried to say something once, to ask her about her day, where she'd been. She smiled, that same smile I had once fallen in love with, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't need to worry about that," she said. "Just focus on getting better." It was meant to comfort me. Instead, it shut me out. One evening, I woke up after a nap to find her gone, though she'd promised to stay. The nurse told me she'd left just an hour earlier. Said she had something important, the nurse mumbled absently while adjusting my pillows. Something important. I told myself she was overwhelmed. That caretaking wasn't easy. That maybe she needed space, time to decompress. I wanted to believe she was still my Amelia, the woman who had cried at our vows, who once stayed up with me all night because I had a fever and couldn't sleep. But the warmth in her eyes was fading. Her hand felt colder each time she held mine. And some days, she didn't hold it at all. One afternoon, I caught her checking her phone while she thought I was asleep. Her thumb moved quickly, her eyes flicking up to me every few seconds. I saw the shadow of a smile, faint but undeniable, cross her lips at whatever she read. Then it was gone. Her face reset into soft concern as she glanced back at me. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I was lying in a bed, half broken, dependent on nurses to help me piss into a bottle. How could I accuse the one person who hadn't abandoned me? But that night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. Something had shifted. I didn't know what. But I felt it. Like the moment before a storm, when the wind changes and the sky turns a darker shade of gray. It wasn't panic yet. Not quite. But it was the beginning. Of doubt. Of suspicion. Of the unraveling. Weeks passed. My body mended in fragments. Bones calcified, muscles twitched under disuse, nerves fired with pain like the memory of a scream. I learned the vocabulary of recovery, physio, atrophy, scar tissue, but none of it touched the wound I didn't know how to speak about. The quiet, cold hole forming between me and Amelia. She still came, still smiled. Still kissed my forehead and told me she loved me. But it was like watching a video of her, not having her in the room. She didn't linger anymore. Her visits were clipped, practiced. She gave updates on the house, the bills, the dog, all the details she knew I'd ask about. She knew the script. But her eyes rarely met mine for long. Once, in a flash of self-betrayal, I watched her through the slit of my eyes, pretending to sleep. She sat beside me in silence, phone in hand, texting. Not once did she look at me. She typed with a smile I hadn't seen in months, not since before the accident. She bit her lip once, giggled softly. Then glanced up, checked on me, and tucked her phone away before whispering, "Sleep well, baby." That whisper hurt more than the shattered bones ever could. It was so tender. So false. A nurse named Colleen had started working my floor. She was older, maybe in her early 50s, and had the kind of no-nonsense warmth you couldn't fake. She looked after me like a son, and some days, when the pain was bad and the silence from Amelia worse, she became the only person I could talk to. One day, Colleen lingered longer than usual while changing my dressings. Her hands paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "She didn't come today," she asked softly. "She's busy," I murmured. "Work's been hectic." Colleen didn't reply right away. Then she said, almost too casually, "She was here yesterday. But not in your room." I turned to her, startled. "What do you mean?" "She was out in the waiting area for a bit. Then she left with someone. Tall guy, dark jacket. They seemed close." I stared at her, my throat closing. "She didn't come in?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Colleen shook her head. "Not that I saw." I wanted to scream. To accuse her of lying, to accuse myself of paranoia. But instead I just lay there, breathing hard, watching the ceiling crack under the weight of something breaking inside me. That night, when Amelia did visit, I watched her differently. She avoided my eyes. Her phone buzzed twice and she silenced it quickly. I asked her if she'd been here the day before. She blinked, then nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just for a bit." "Had to leave early, you were sleeping." Lie. I could see it, clear as glass. I nodded, pretending to accept it. But a crack had opened, and once a crack starts, it never stops spreading. That evening, I asked Colleen if she could help me with something. "I need you to do me a favor," I said quietly, wincing as I adjusted in bed. "I need to know if she's really visiting me, or someone else." Colleen's eyes softened with sorrow. "You sure you want to know?" "No," I whispered. "But I need to. Because somewhere deep inside, past the pain and medication and fragile hope, I already knew. I just wasn't ready to face it yet." Colleen didn't bring it up again for 3 days. In that time, I kept up the charade. I smiled when Amelia entered, asked about the houseplants, pretended I still believed in us. But inside, my thoughts twisted. Every word she said felt rehearsed. Every glance to her phone, every sudden change in topic, they all took on meaning now. I became hyper-aware of the details I used to overlook. The way she showered before visiting. The faint cologne that wasn't mine on her jacket. The red mark I once saw on her collarbone, which she brushed off as the seatbelt rubbing too hard. Colleen finally leaned in as she was helping me back into bed from the wheelchair. Her voice was low, guarded. I asked around. "The men she's been with, he's been here more than once. He never visits you. He meets her at the cafe downstairs or waits in the parking lot. They talk. Laugh. Sometimes they leave together. Every time, she says she's coming to see you." My legs had long since stopped supporting me, but that moment, it felt like my heart gave way too. I sat on the edge of the bed, muscles trembling, staring at the linoleum. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I wish I wasn't," she whispered. She put a hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't feel it. That night, I cried. Quietly, bitterly. I didn't want the nurses to hear. I didn't want them to see the man who once swore he'd protect his wife, now broken not just in body but in soul. I cried for the years we shared, the way we danced barefoot in the kitchen after too much wine, the nights we whispered our fears under the blanket, her head on my chest as if the world couldn't touch us. I cried for the night I asked her to marry me. On the beach, at dusk. She'd said yes before I even finished asking. I cried because I was still in love with her. Even now. Even knowing she was already gone. But then something shifted. On the fifth night, she left her phone on the side table while she went to the restroom. A rare lapse. I stared at it. My pulse roared in my ears. My hands shook. It felt like a betrayal to even consider touching it, but hadn't she already betrayed me? I reached. Face ID. Locked. But notifications bloomed across the screen. Messages from a contact named M. I didn't recognize the number. The preview read, "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. When can we talk about leaving him?" I felt like I was drowning. When she returned, I didn't say a word. Just smiled. Just asked if she could help me reposition my pillow. She obliged, humming softly. The very sound of her voice made me want to scream. That night I didn't sleep. I watched the shadows on the ceiling creep from one side to the other. I wondered if this was what betrayal felt like, not just a stab in the back, but a slow suffocation, like waking up in a room where someone's stealing your air inch by inch. I told Colleen the next day. She looked sad, but not surprised. "You have every right to be angry," she said. I shook my head. "I'm beyond angry. I feel erased. Like the man she promised to love doesn't exist anymore. Like I'm already dead to her." I didn't know what I'd do yet. But something had been born in me, something jagged and cold. I wasn't going to die in that bed, silent and small, while she built a new life on the ashes of mine. No. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. There is a moment after a revelation when the world feels quieter, not peaceful, but stunned. Like the silence after a bomb goes off, when your ears ring and you can't hear yourself think. That was the silence I lived in. Everything I had trusted, everything I'd clung to while strapped to this broken body, had cracked wide open. And still, I played the role. Still, I let her in. I kissed her cheek. I thanked her for the flowers. I nodded when she talked about her day. But inside, something was dying. The next time she visited, she brought takeout, my favorite, from that little Thai place we used to go to after movie nights. I didn't eat. I couldn't stomach anything anymore. But I watched her eat. Watched the way she laughed at her own stories. Her phone buzzed once, and she reached for it out of habit, hesitated when she saw me watching, and left it face down. Too late. I'd seen the name flash again. M. Later, I asked her, "Who's M?" She froze for half a second. Just a flicker. But I saw it. "Oh, just a coworker," she said, smiling too quickly. "He's on my project team." He. Coworker. Lie. The quiet between us felt like a scream. That night, I asked Colleen for a favor. "I need to see him," I said. "This man she's meeting. I need to know who he is." Colleen hesitated. She didn't want to get more involved. But she knew the look in my eyes. A man not seeking gossip, a man seeking the truth that would let him finally mourn. 2 days later, she wheeled me to the courtyard under the guise of some fresh air and sunshine. We waited. And then I saw him. Tall. Confident. Early 30s, maybe. Business casual. Handsome in that polished, safe way. Amelia walked toward him like she hadn't just left a husband recovering from near-death upstairs. Her face lit up, brighter than it had in months. They embraced. Not just a hug. Familiar. Intimate. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I watched as if from underwater, as if this was someone else's life unraveling before me. Then she kissed him. Quick. Almost bashful. But not the kind of kiss you give a coworker. Colleen said nothing. She just placed her hand gently on my arm. You didn't deserve this, she said. I couldn't respond. My body was numb. But something in me, the part that still wanted to believe in our marriage, had finally bled dry. She returned to my room an hour later, cheeks flushed, breath quick. I'm sorry I was late, she said. I just nodded. It's okay. She sat down, chattered about a new Netflix show, and asked if I wanted to watch something together. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat burned with all the words I wanted to say, the betrayal I wanted to throw in her face. But I knew this wasn't the moment. Not yet. No, this had to be exact. Surgical. She had shattered something sacred. I wouldn't scream. I would let her talk. Let her feel safe. And when the time came, I would show her what it felt like to be left in the dark. The next morning, I asked Colleen for a phone. Not mine, a new one. Something I could use without Amelia knowing. She didn't ask questions. Just nodded and brought me one that afternoon. With shaking hands and a bruised heart, I started digging. It wasn't hard to find him. M was Michael Farrow. A project manager at the same firm where Amelia worked. He'd commented on some of her old photos, now buried under years of wedding pictures and anniversary posts. His profile was polished, curated. Pictures of wine tastings, dog parks, team building weekends. There was one photo that stopped me cold. From 3 weeks ago, him and Amelia, arm in arm, grinning beneath a streetlight in a part of town I hadn't seen since before the accident. She wore the same green coat she wore to visit me that day. The caption read, "When late meetings turn into the best nights." I stared at it for so long the screen dimmed and went dark. I felt like a fool. Not just for loving her, but for trusting her silence. For turning my suspicion into guilt, for telling myself I was too broken, too paranoid. That's what hurt the most, the way I doubted myself to protect her image. But now I saw her clearly. Amelia, my wife, had become a stranger wearing the face of the woman I loved. A stranger who kissed my forehead in the morning and someone else's lips in the evening. Who told me to stay strong while she sought comfort in the arms of another man. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to do this carefully, to reclaim my dignity, my voice. The next time she visited, I asked her to bring my laptop. She looked surprised, but didn't question it. Of course, she said. You want to get back into your writing? I nodded. Writing had always been my refuge. Before the accident, I used to write essays, short stories, sometimes even love letters to her. That night, I wrote her a letter. Not a scream. Not a list of accusations. A letter filled with memory, of the day we met, of our first apartment with the leaking ceiling, of the time I stood outside in the rain for 3 hours waiting to propose because she was late coming home. I reminded her of the version of us I thought was real. And then, gently, I told her the truth. I saw you. I know. I saw the man. I saw the kiss. I saw everything. I didn't include anger. I didn't need to. The betrayal stood on its own. At the end, I wrote. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify. But I need you to know that I loved you with everything I had, and I believed you did too. Until the very moment you stopped. I left the letter in a folder on the desktop, labeled simply, "For you." When she came the next day, I asked her to help me open the laptop. Told her there was something I wanted her to read before our next conversation. She hesitated. I could see it in her eyes, the part of her that feared what I knew. But she smiled anyway, nodded, and opened it. She didn't read it in front of me. She took it with her, promising to return later that night. She didn't. And the next morning, her phone number stopped working. Blocked. Deleted. Gone. There was no note. No apology. Just absence. A silence more final than any fight. I sat alone that night, watching the sunset paint the room orange. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel pain in my bones. I felt it deeper. Where a presence used to live. But I also felt something else. Stillness. I had given her the chance to face what she'd done. She chose to vanish. So I let her. There is a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It scratches. After Amelia vanished, no calls, no messages, no footsteps in the hall, the hospital room felt cavernous. Empty in a way it hadn't been even when I was alone. Because this time, it wasn't about absence. It was about abandonment. Even the nurses moved differently. They sensed it, that shift. Colleen came by more often, bringing tea, checking vitals she didn't need to check just to sit near me. Her kindness was steady. It kept me from falling into the dark completely. But the truth? I was adrift. I'd spent weeks holding on to the image of Amelia as my anchor. I endured agony believing it had meaning, that I was fighting to return to someone who needed me, who loved me, who saw me. Now I wasn't so sure anyone saw me at all. One night, I asked Colleen a question that had been haunting me. If I hadn't survived, do you think she would have cried? Colleen didn't answer right away. Her eyes met mine, full of sorrow. I think she would have cried, she said softly. But maybe not just for you. Maybe for the life she couldn't decide if she wanted or not. Some people mourn their guilt more than they mourn who they lost. That answer broke something in me, not from pain, but from clarity. I wasn't grieving Amelia anymore. I was grieving the version of her that existed only in my memory. The woman who laughed into my neck, who painted little hearts on our bathroom mirror with lipstick, who whispered forever with absolute conviction. That woman was gone long before my accident. I just hadn't been willing to look. The recovery team said I was progressing faster than expected. I pushed harder, demanded more. Because now, I wasn't getting better for anyone else. I was getting better for me. There was rage, yes. Rage that sat low and simmering, not loud, not volatile, but ever-present. It whispered when I did another painful stretch, she was with him while you lay here in agony. It burned when I learned to walk again, she left when you needed her the most. But I didn't let that rage consume me. I let it fuel me. Every new step was a refusal to let her betrayal define the end of my story. Colleen eventually brought me an envelope. She left this at the nurse's station, she said. Inside was a letter. Brief. Apologetic in tone but vague in meaning. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to leave someone who almost died. I panicked. I was wrong. I'm sorry. No signature. No name. Just cowardice wrapped in sentiment. I folded it once. Then twice. Then tore it down the middle. She had already left. She didn't deserve the space in my mind anymore. That night, I asked Colleen if she could bring in a mirror. She frowned. You sure? Yes, I said. I need to see what's left. She brought it the next morning. Full length. No filters. No forgiveness. I stood, slowly, with the walker. My arms trembled. My legs ached. But I stood. And I looked. My face was gaunt. My scars visible. My body thinner, weaker. But my eyes. They were sharp again. That's when I knew, I wasn't waiting for her to come back. I was waiting for me. And I had finally arrived. Discharge day came with little ceremony. The nurses hugged me. Colleen cried quietly, her arms wrapped tight around my shoulders. You're stronger than you know, she whispered. Not just here, she tapped my chest, but here too. She tapped the side of my temple. I nodded. There were no words that could repay what she gave me. Kindness, honesty, truth. She was the only one who stood by me without obligation. The hospital doors opened to the world again, harsh sunlight, cold air, noise. Everything had moved on without me. I had to decide now whether I would move with it. Home was unfamiliar. Amelia had been gone long enough to erase the signs of her, no sweaters on the chair, no half-empty coffee cups by the sink. A few of her books were still there, but I packed them into a box, taping it closed without ceremony. No rage. No tears. Just finality. I found her wedding ring in the bathroom drawer. I didn't even remember her taking it off. It sat in my palm like a question I no longer needed to answer. I mailed it to her office, no note. Let her draw her own conclusion. The house was quiet, but it wasn't haunted. Not anymore. I made new noises. I turned on music, not our songs, but mine. I opened windows. I cooked again, even if my body protested. I burned eggs. I laughed at myself. Laughter. It came back slowly, but it came. So did the dreams. Not of her, but of walking again, of running. Of standing somewhere high and breathing in freedom without remembering the moment I nearly died. I saw Amelia once more. By accident. At a bookstore, of all places. I was browsing alone, still favoring one leg. She walked in holding his hand, the men from the courtyard. Michael. They looked content. She saw me. Froze. I didn't. I just nodded. Not in forgiveness. Not in malice. In goodbye. She didn't follow me. She didn't speak. And I was glad. Because some things are better left unsaid. I didn't need closure. I was the closure. I left the store and stepped into the evening air, the first chill of autumn brushing my skin. I took a breath and realized I hadn't thought about her all day. I smiled. Pain changes you. But betrayal? Betrayal strips you down, burns away illusion, and if you survive it, if you crawl through the ashes, you emerge with nothing false left on your skin. I had loved deeply. I had lost honestly. And now I was free, not from her, but from needing anything from her. I was not broken. I was becoming. And I walked away.